Right now, in this timeline, you're speaking a language that wouldn't exist. You're using a calendar that wouldn't exist. The country you live in, the borders, the language, even the religion you were raised with, none of it survived because 1,500 years ago, an empire that controlled 60 million people fell apart. But what if it didn't? What if the Roman Empire never collapsed? This isn't just, what if Rome stuck around a few more centuries? This is the single biggest what if in human history. Bigger than what if the Nazis won. Bigger than what if the dinosaurs never died. Because Rome wasn't just an empire. Rome was the operating system the entire Western world was eventually rebuilt on top of. Our laws, built on Roman law. Our alphabet, Roman. Our calendar, Roman. The Catholic Church, literally headquartered in the old Roman capital. Rome didn't just fall, Rome fell, and everything else had to be invented from the rubble. So what happens if there's no rubble? What happens if the foundation never cracks? Stick around, because by the end of this, you'll understand why historians call the fall of Rome the hinge of history. And what's on the other side of that hinge is stranger than anything you've imagined. Quick context, because this matters for what's coming. By 400 AD, Rome was already cracking, too big to govern, too expensive to defend, splitting into east and west. In 476 AD, a Germanic general named Odoacer deposed the last Western Roman emperor, a teenager, ironically named Romulus. The West collapsed into fragments. The East, the Byzantine Empire, actually survived for another 1,000 years. So here's our pivot point. What if the West holds too? What if Rome, the whole thing, never breaks? There's no dark ages. That term gets debated by historians, sure, but the infrastructure collapse was real. Roman roads stopped being maintained. Aqueducts crumbled. Cities that had 500,000 people shrank to 20,000. Literacy rates cratered for centuries. If Rome holds, none of that happens. The roads stay maintained. The aqueducts keep running. Trade networks that connected Britain to Egypt to Mesopotamia stay intact instead of shattering into 1,000 competing tribal kingdoms, which means the technology and knowledge loss that took Europe almost 1,000 years to claw back never happens. Concrete technology that wasn't replicated until the 1800s, still in use, continuous use. But here's where it gets interesting, because an empire that never collapses isn't a frozen museum piece. It still has to survive everything that's coming for it. Second domino, and this one's bigger than people. Christianity doesn't spread the way it did. Christianity didn't spread despite Rome falling. A huge part of its expansion happened because Rome fell. The church became the only stable institution left standing in Western Europe. Bishops became the de facto government. The Pope filled a power vacuum that used to be filled by emperors. No collapse means no power vacuum. The Roman state stays the dominant institution, not the church. You could end up with an empire where religion is just one branch of imperialism, not the most powerful institution in the West for 1,000 years. That alone reshapes the Crusades, the Reformation, colonialism's religious justification. Entire branches of history just don't grow. And we haven't even gotten to the part that changes everything else downstream. Here's the one that breaks people's brain. France, Germany, Spain, Italy, England. None of these exist as we know them. These countries didn't spring up from nowhere. They formed in the power vacuum after Rome fell, as Germanic tribes carved up the wreckage. The Franks became France. The Visigoths shaped Spain. Centuries of fragmentation, war, and feudal consolidation built the borders on your map right now. If Rome never falls, there's no wreckage to carve up. You don't get France. You get Roman provinces, Gallia, Hispania, Britannia, administered from one center for another 1,000+ years. Which raises the real question, does a single empire even hold together that long? Could one government realistically administer territory from Scotland to the Sahara to the Persian border for 15+ centuries, through plagues, succession crises, economic collapses, and external invasions from peoples Rome never even knew existed yet? Maybe it splinters anyway, just later, and along completely different lines than the ones we got. Maybe it doesn't splinter, and instead becomes something closer to a single continent-spanning civilization. The way China stayed one continuous civilizational identity, instead of fracturing into Europe-style nation-state. That's not a small difference. That's two entirely different shapes for the modern world.